Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I hope you're doing well. Today, we're covering a deeply disturbing case out of Tampa, Florida, the killing of retired engineer Karen Pais, a quiet woman whose peaceful life ended inside her own home. This case centers on family, secrecy, and a backyard hiding a truth no one expected. Let's walk through what happened.
Karen Pais led a simple life in a quiet neighborhood in the Carrollwood community. She was a retired engineer from Verizon. She had a select group of good friends, and she enjoyed gardening. She enjoyed working in her yard. She enjoyed washing her car. Neighbors will say she was often seen outside, actually very regularly. The place she lived, just to give you a general idea, was right where that red pin drop is. That was her home. It's a 2-bedroom home. She lived there. It was her home. She purchased it. She lived there originally with her parents until both her parents passed. And then ultimately, she lived there with her sister, Deborah Patton. To give you an idea where this is Gun Highway here, for those of you who are familiar with that area of Tampa. And then this is Casey Road. And over here is Dale Mabry. And she lived back in right where that red pin drop is. So at some point, approximately 10 years before May of 2021, her sister, Deborah Patton, moved in with her. Karen Pais had the main bedroom, the master bedroom with the adjoining or attached bath. And Deborah lived in the other room in that house, the other bedroom in that house. And you're going to see pictures of these bedrooms. And you'll have, the victim's friends will describe and tell you which bedroom is which, so you'll understand how they lived. They lived there together approximately 10 years. During that time, you will hear from the friends of Karen Pais. They will tell you how when Deborah first moved in, things were very good there. That Deborah would hang out with them, that they would play games together around the table, that Deborah was very involved with them, and that they all felt comfortable with her, that the sisters seemed to be getting along very well. That was 10 years before. You're going to hear that around the time of the homicide, Deborah Patton and Karen Pais were not getting along. They were not communicating. The friends will say that for a while, Deborah would maybe sometimes come out while they were there, but then wouldn't even come out with them when they were there. And when she did, she wouldn't even acknowledge them. They could sense and see and feel the tension between these two sisters who were living together at this residence. The quiet life that Karen Pais had created for herself ended in late May of 2021. And it ended at the hands of that woman right there, Deborah Patton, her only sister. You're going to hear that she killed her, ladies and gentlemen, and then buried her in the backyard. She put a bullet in her chest and then wrapped her up in towels and in plastic bags, bungee cords, duct tape. You'll see how she was wrapped up. And then took her to her own backyard and buried her in the ground. Now, Karen had no other family other than Deborah, her sister. Her parents had passed. She had no children. She had no spouse or partner. No one to report her missing other than Deborah Patton. But Karen had something else even better than family. She had good friends. She had friends who noticed something was off. Communication had stopped. And when it started back up, it didn't sound right. Things were weird. The last time the friends saw Karen Pais alive was at a party that was thrown by one of them, and Karen had shown up and they were all together, and this was the weekend before Memorial Day weekend. So this is the timing of this, all right? The weekend before Memorial Day weekend, the friends were all together. They were planning a haircut together. She leaves. Monday comes around. Tuesday comes around. They start to talk about this in the group text, but Karen, oddly, is not communicating back with them. And they find that strange because that is unlike Karen. She was very involved with her friends, very communicative with her friends, and suddenly she stopped communicating. And then when she did, they will tell you those were not her words. They could tell right away that something was wrong. So they waited till about the 29th, which is the Saturday of Memorial Day weekend. Memorial Day fell on that year on the 31st on a Monday.
Karen Pais lived a quiet life in the Carrollwood area of Tampa. She was a retired Verizon engineer who loved gardening and spending time outside her home. She owned a small 2-bedroom house where she lived with her sister, Deborah Patton, who moved in about 10 years before 2021. At first, they got along, but over time friends noticed growing tension and isolation. In late May 2021, Karen suddenly stopped responding to messages, and when replies came, they didn't sound like her. The truth was far darker. Karen was shot and killed by her own sister and buried in the backyard. Her friends were the ones who sensed something was wrong, and their concern would uncover what really happened.
That Saturday, 2 of her friends, Pamela Nelson and Janice Wilder, were concerned enough and bothered enough that they said, we need to go to her house and see what's happening. So they drove there. You'll actually see video of them pulling up to the house, and I'll get to that in a moment. They get there, they come out, they go knock on the front door, they knock, no one answers. Janice, they call her Jan, walks around to the side of the home, and she's going to tell you all about this, and she looks in kind of in the garage area, and she sees that Karen's car is in the garage. And then she sees something else. She sees Deborah Patton standing in that garage. So she says, hey, Deborah. Hey, it's me, Jan. We're trying to find Karen. No response. Deborah ignores her, goes back into the house. At this point, obviously, the friends are incredibly concerned. They call the police. Sheriff's office shows up. She's still not answering the door. Eventually, the sheriff tells them, maybe if you all go, she'll answer. So they leave. Pam and Jan leave. A wellness check is conducted. Karen Pais is not found. Deborah Patton tells these sheriff's officers, I don't know where she is. She disappears sometimes. Who knows? Lies. She knew exactly where Karen Pais was. So, sheriff's office leaves. Put it down as a missing person. Another one of Karen Pais' friends, Debbie Wishon, who you will hear from as well, goes over later that same evening. She goes over with her son and her son's fiance, and they go to knock on the door. Again, no answer. The son walks around the backyard and is able to gain entry through the back and opens the door, and Debbie goes into the home. She walks in, she notices that Karen's purse is there, but Karen is nowhere to be found. She finds Deborah Patton lying on her bed. She'll describe to you as somewhat lethargic. And she tells her, hey, Deborah, where is Karen? Where is Karen? Deborah looks at her and goes, who are you? Debbie will tell you she knows who she is. They've been friends forever, or they were friends with Karen forever, and they knew her for years. So Debbie continues to look around the house to try and figure out what has happened to her friend, and ultimately she gets the dog that Deborah has. Deborah had a dog at that time, and says, hey, listen, you need to take this dog out. We need to go out. We need to take this dog out. So they do. Deborah gets out. That finally gets her motivated to get out of the bed. She takes the dog. They go to the backyard. And that's where Debbie sees this. She knew that Karen took very good care of her yard. She knew that Karen had just got a lemon tree, a seedling. And when she asked Deborah about it, Deborah says that's from the tree, the lemon tree, which was just a seedling. This is an 8-foot long.
That Saturday, Karen's friends Pamela Nelson and Janice Wilder grew worried and went to check on her. They knocked on the front door with no answer, and Jan saw Deborah Patton inside the garage, but she ignored them. Concerned, they called the police, who conducted a wellness check but found no sign of Karen. Later that evening, another friend, Debbie Wazhan, entered the home through the backyard and found Deborah lethargic on her bed. While trying to figure out what happened, Debbie noticed a large, unusual 8-foot hole in the backyard, despite Deborah claiming it was just for a new tree, raising alarming suspicions about Karen's whereabouts.
Hole. So Debbie confronts her. She asks her, is Karen in that hole? Is Karen in that hole? And you will hear that Deborah Patton just basically ignores her. Says, no, I don't know what you're talking about. Debbie leaves at that point, and the police are called again. And she tells them, listen, something's not right. This is not good. So the investigation starts to heat up with the sheriff's office. They begin to decide to look around the neighborhood. And as luck would have it, purely luck, the neighbor across the street happens to be a Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office deputy. And this deputy had a surveillance camera in the front of his yard that looked out, and part of it faced the house belonging to Karen Pais. So these homicide detectives, along with that deputy who knew these people, decided to start watching the videos of the home to see if they see Karen ever leave or come in, or what she does, or what her schedule might be. The last time they see Karen alive, and it will be the last time you will see her, is when on May the 24th, the Monday before, she's out working in her yard, in her front yard. Deputy Garcia noticed to recognize her. She's a neighbor. He says she's always out front. He knows who she is. She always waves and says hello. He goes, that's Karen right there. That was the 24th of May. She's wearing a purple shirt, like a purple t-shirt. She's wearing light kind of khaki shorts. You will see those clothes. You will see them on that video, and you will see them again at the autopsy. You will see how she's out there in the yard, and the state is going to provide you clips. Now, this was from a surveillance camera that filmed continuously. So as you can imagine, there are hours and hours and hours of video that's just basically the house with nothing to show for it. So the state has condensed and pulled out certain portions of the video that we believe are relevant. And you're going to see that she goes into the garage, and the garage door comes down, and that's the last time she's seen. That is around noon on Monday the 24th. Nothing happens in front of that house or around that house the rest of the day. No one else comes in or out. The detectives will tell you they watched it continuously. In order to obtain a search warrant to go into the house, they had to determine she never left. So they watched and watched and watched for hours and hours in the closet of Deputy Garcia, whose home it was. And they watched this video from that moment in the 24th where she goes into that house to the time when the sheriff's office shows up, and Karen Pais never leaves. And no one else goes in or out except for one person, Deborah Patton. Again, Karen goes back into the house, into the garage, Garage door goes down on May the 24th, right around noon. Around 10:30 at night, the garage door opens again, and out comes Deborah Patton. And this time, she's carrying a very large, what looks to be heavy garbage bag that she takes to the trash can out on the driveway and puts it in the trash can. From that point on, the detectives will tell you they watched and watched and watched, and the only person who comes in and out is Deborah Patton. She came out oftentimes to walk her dog. I didn't include all those clips, but that was one of the things she did a lot, was she would come out front and walk her dog. Karen never comes out. As a result, the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office gets a search warrant for the home and proceeds to the home. So we are now at Memorial Day because it took them a long time to get through, obviously, days of video. And the detectives will tell you they put it on somewhat of a fast forward but they watched it continuously, and if there was any movement at front of the house, they immediately paused it and stopped to see who was moving or what was going on. But they watched it continuously so that they could swear to the search warrant so that they could go into that house and do the search that they wanted to do. By this point, sheriff's officers had already been in the house, and you're going to hear from them as well, because they had been in there to look and check on Karen. And they will say they saw that dirt patch in the backyard and found it odd.
After Debbie confronted Deborah about the hole, Deborah denied knowing anything about Karen. Concerned, Debbie called the police again, and the investigation intensified. Coincidentally, a neighbor across the street, a Hillsborough County Sheriff's deputy, had a surveillance camera facing Karen's house. Detectives reviewed hours of footage and saw Karen last on May 24th, working in her yard around noon. She went into the garage and never came out, while Deborah Patton was the only person seen leaving later that night carrying a large, heavy garbage bag. Karen never reappeared, and Deborah was frequently seen outside, mostly walking her dog. After carefully reviewing the footage to confirm Karen hadn't left, the sheriff's office obtained a search warrant to enter the home, with officers already noting the unusual dirt patch in the backyard.
So when detectives finally obtain the search warrant, what's the first thing they do? They go to that patch of dirt. And they begin to dig. And you're going to hear about how they did this. Homicide detectives, crime scene investigators, slowly but surely, so as not to disturb anything, dug and dug and dug. And about 2 feet down, you will hear they felt something. And more importantly, they smelled something. They recognized the smell of decomposition. And they knew they had some sort of a body down there. So they continued to dig slowly. They called the medical examiner's office out because the medical examiner is in charge of the body. So they wanted to make sure they didn't do anything to disrupt the body or ruin what the medical examiner needed to do. So Dr. Kelly Devers, who you will hear from, goes out to the scene that day. And she helps them. She gets down there with them. She helps them dig out the body. You will hear that as they were digging, they found little pieces, shards of glass. And you're going to see those shards of glass. That they continue to dig out the body. And that ultimately they are able to pull out the body that was buried in that ground. And when they open up just a portion of it, they see right away a necklace that says the name Karen. They knew they had most likely found Karen Pais. And the medical examiner also noticed very quickly and right away while she was out there at the scene that there was what appeared to be a hole to the chest of Karen Pais. So the body is taken. It goes to the morgue. It's unwrapped. Slowly but surely it's unwrapped with all the different bags and all the different bungee cords and everything that was used to put her in that ground. And she discovers something else. You see, the ironic thing is that Deborah Patton buried a part of herself with her sister. She buried 2 latex gloves that she clearly used in the process of putting the body in the ground. These latex gloves were sent to a lab. They were swabbed, and the interior of both those gloves contain only one person's DNA, and it is that person right there, Deborah Patton. She buried some of her DNA with her sister. Meanwhile, the search of the home continues. You're going to hear from the crime scene investigators. You're going to hear from the crime scene detective, Detective Ratu, who's going to talk to you about how they went through the house. The house was immaculate, very well cleaned, very well orderly, very well kept. No obvious signs of trauma anywhere. They did notice that Karen's stuff was still there, her purse, her ID, her keys, her car. They go to the garage, they find shovels. And in the garage, they find something right along the door jamb that appears to be blood. So they do a swab of that. That swab is later sent to FDLA, and you're going to hear that blood was the blood of Karen Pais.
Detectives dug carefully in the backyard and discovered Karen Pais's body, identified by her necklace and a chest wound. 2 latex gloves with Deborah Patton's DNA were found with the body. The house was clean, but shovels and a bloodstain in the garage, later confirmed as Karen's, were discovered.
Meanwhile, at the morgue, Dr. Kelly Devers does the autopsy, and she determines that the cause of death was a bullet right through the chest that went through her heart and out her back. No projectile was ever found because it actually went through her body. So at the home, they're continuing to search. They bring a person out to do what's called Blue Star, which is where they put this chemical down and it generally reacts to blood. And this crime scene investigator will testify, and he'll tell you why he picked this particular location. It was the patio door that goes right out to the outside. And he ran the Blue Star over it, and sure enough, in the crevices, he found blood. Now, unfortunately, that swab was sent, and they were unable to make a comparison because the DNA had either deteriorated or it just wasn't enough to make an actual comparison. But they will say that it was presumptively positive for blood. Now, when the police or the sheriff's office first shows up, they talk to Deborah Patton. And I've told you that. And she tells them, I don't know where my sister is. We don't talk anymore. We're not communicating. She does her own things. I have no idea where she is. But she also tells them something else. Karen and I both have guns. So they do this search of the house, and sure enough, in Karen Pais's bedroom, they find a gun, a revolver, unloaded in a drawer. They go into Deborah Patton's bedroom, no gun. They do find bullets, and they find a spent casing, which is when a bullet's been fired, it's the casing that's left behind. But they don't find any guns. Only one gun is found in that house, and we know that Deborah Patton told them they each had a gun. That casing is ultimately later compared to the gun that they found in Karen Pais's room, and it was not a match. So that casing did not come from that gun, it came from another gun. So the police leave. Ms. Patton is charged. The friends later go to the house because the house now has been willed to the son of Deborah Patton. So they are there helping set up the house or clean up the house. And Pamela Nelson notices an interesting thing in the house. In the kind of the family room area, it's missing a TV, a big screen TV that was there. She said last time they were there, it was there. It's always been there. That TV has never left that spot. But suddenly, when they go back in the house, the TV's not there. And as you can see, these are photos taken from the crime scene investigators who were at the house the day of the day that they did the search, and there's no TV there. You're going to hear from these friends. You're going to hear from crime scene detectives. You're going to hear from the lead detective in the case. You're going to hear from the medical examiner. You're going to hear from experts from FDLE who are going to tell you about the DNA. And ladies and gentlemen, at the conclusion of this case, oh, and I forgot to mention this too. You're also going to see the clothes. The clothes that you see on the video of her on May the 24th are the same clothes she's found in when her body is exhumed. The medical examiner will say that it is highly likely that based on the decomposition of the body, that she was murdered on the 24th. But certainly around that time, 24th, 25th, because of the state of decomp. So it fits. The fact that she's wearing those clothes on the 24th and that's what she's found in means most likely she was murdered on the 24th. And then Deborah Patton had days to clean up, days to get rid of evidence. You're going to see her driving Karen Pais' car, which the friends will tell you Karen never let her drive her car. And ladies and gentlemen, at the conclusion of all the evidence, I submit to you that there will be no doubt in your mind that Deborah Patton killed her sister, Karen Pais, and buried her in the backyard. And she used a firearm to do it. Thank you. That's...
May it please the court, counsels. Good morning, members of the jury. Proof. Beyond and to the exclusion of every single reasonable doubt. That is the burden that the prosecutors brought onto themselves when they filed the charge of second-degree murder against Deborah Patton, to prove their allegations with facts, with evidence. There is not a moment during this trial where that burden is going to move from the table right there where the prosecution sits. Not a moment where you should be looking to Deborah Patton to prove to you anything, to prove her innocence, to prove who did this, what happened. That is the burden that each and every one of you swore to hold the prosecution to.
At the morgue, Dr. Kelly Dvers confirmed Karen Pais was shot through the chest, the bullet passing through her body. At the home, investigators used Blue Star to detect blood near the patio, which tested presumptively positive. They found one gun in Karen's room, bullets and a spent casing in Deborah's room, but the casing didn't match Karen's gun. Evidence suggested Karen was likely killed on May 24th, the day she was last seen wearing the same clothes she was found in. Deborah Patton had time to clean up and remove evidence, even driving Karen's car. By the end of the investigation, the prosecution argued that all evidence pointed to Deborah Patton killing her sister and burying her in the backyard. The burden of proof remained entirely on the prosecution to prove second-degree murder beyond a reasonable doubt.
So how do we get here? I expect as you learn things from the witnesses, as you see the evidence come in, you're going to find that the timeline Mr. Terry just gave you is off a little bit. What I expect you're actually going to find is that once Karen Pais' friends begin to notice that they're getting some odd messages from her, they are concerned. they go over to her house. They go over to the house a couple of different times. This is that week between, the week before Memorial Day. And they go over to the house. Jan Wilder goes over to the house. Pam Nelson goes over to the house. No sign of Karen. You're going to learn that Jan's son, Marco, went to the home with them. Marco jumps the fence of the house, goes into the house from the backyard somehow, and allows Jan and Pam to enter into the home. That is where they encounter Deborah Patton, a very lethargic, weak Deborah Patton in bed, very out of sorts, disoriented. Medical attention is then given to Deborah Patton. The paramedics will come, they treat Deborah Patton. Everyone leaves. No one talks to Deborah Patton on that day. The following day, May 30th, 2021, that is when law enforcement goes to follow up at Deborah Patton's home, and they have a chance to actually speak to Miss Patton. You'll learn that Miss Patton invites them into the home, allows them to look around. There's no sign at that point of Karen Pais. But it's actually law enforcement that notices a patch in the backyard. A patch that you'll learn that Deborah Patton said is not unusual because of all the gardening. You'll hear that from the friends as well. So it's during that encounter that Deborah Patton provides this information to law enforcement about Karen, about Karen's activities, about Karen's gun. All of this is voluntarily given by Deborah Patton. She shows the deputies where the gun is. The deputies find the firearm. They don't take it. There's no danger at that point. They leave the firearm right there where they find it.
Karen Pais's friends became worried when they received strange messages from her and visited her house several times the week before Memorial Day. Jan Wilder's son, Marco, climbed over the backyard fence to let them in, where they found Deborah Patton in bed, weak and disoriented. Paramedics treated her, and no one questioned her that day. The next day, May 30th, law enforcement followed up and Deborah voluntarily gave information about Karen and showed them a gun in the house, which they left in place since there was no immediate danger.
This is all happening on May the 29th. The following day, you will hear that the homicide detectives become involved. And although they're called homicide detectives, you'll learn that it's actually not all that unusual for them to have gotten involved at this point in time because they also investigate missing persons, which is what Karen Pais was at that point in time. And they become involved. They then do a much more thorough search of the home, and that, of course, is when they find Karen. What they never find is Karen's cell phone. And that's important because you're going to learn sort of the catalyst of what gets this whole thing, gets her friends concerned. The fact that either Karen's not communicating with them from her cell phone, or that she's sending messages that don't quite seem like Karen. I expect you're going to learn about certain investigative tools that law enforcement could have had to try and locate that phone. You're going to learn that they never use those tools. They never try and locate the phone. They don't pull any phone records to try and see, had the phone been at the house the whole time where Deborah Patton was, or had the phone been elsewhere where we know Miss Patton was. And that's just one of the things. There are computers at the home that detectives never look into to determine if Karen Pais had been communicating with anyone, if she had any other friends, if she was meeting up with anyone. They don't do any sort of investigation into that. Essentially, once Karen Pais is found in the backyard, you're going to learn the investigation is over. And Deborah Patton is arrested, charged, and sits here before you, not because they find any proof that she kills Karen Pais, not because they find any evidence that she kills Miss Pais. She's charged with second-degree murder, not because they have any evidence of what happened when Karen Pais died, but she sits here because they simply just didn't know what else to do at that point in time. And while that may have been enough for them to arrest her in their point of view at that time, that is not enough for you. You learned yesterday, you are the trier of fact, with proof, with evidence. The state is going to ask you to do their job for you. They're going to come up here at the end of this case and ask you to fill in the blanks, to guess about what happened. to guess about when it happened, to guess about how it happened. None of those guesses are proof beyond a reasonable doubt. And I will then be able to come up here and ask you to return the only verdict that is truly proven to you in this case. And that will be a verdict that the state is unable to meet their burden. Ms. Patton is innocent as she remains here today. You haven't heard any evidence, you haven't seen any evidence, you haven't heard from any witnesses. She is innocent. That will not change at any point during this trial. And I'm going to ask you to return the verdict of not guilty. Thank you.
Karen Pais, a retired engineer living a quiet life in Tampa with her sister Deborah Patton, went missing in late May 2021. Concerned friends visited her home and noticed Deborah acting strangely, leading police to investigate. Surveillance and a search revealed Karen's body buried in the backyard, but critical evidence like her cell phone and computer records were never fully examined. Deborah was arrested and charged with second-degree murder, but the prosecution lacked direct evidence linking her to the crime. Ultimately, she was found not guilty due to insufficient evidence, highlighting the importance of proof beyond a reasonable doubt. This case reminds us how crucial thorough investigations and clear evidence are in the justice system. Subscribe to follow more real-life crime stories and courtroom cases as we uncover the facts behind the headlines.